G'day, welcome to Tech in 10. Today is the 10th of October. We're going to start at 1:30 today. Thank you for joining us. What we're talking about today is ensuring data privacy with AI. AI is massive at the moment. There's lots of talk about it, but we need to make sure that we're considering all the data privacy requirements. So we're going to go through that today. It's really changing how we are operating businesses and automating tasks. But these advancements also come with challenges that we need to consider, data privacy being the main one. So let's get into those now and see what we've got for you today. So we'll start today now with the key challenges in AI-driven data privacy. So increased data collection is what trains the AI. So collecting data, the more data that it gets, the smarter it becomes, the more context it can provide. But that means that it can also collect a lot of sensitive or personal information. Managing these data sets and how they are used and how they are then used to provide answers is not entirely clear, and not always checked as to where it's stored and who has access to it. So we need to be very careful with that. Another issue is interferences from data. So AI doesn't just collect data; it also analyzes it, and in sensitive information like somebody's health records, financial records, and other things can be put together from unrelated data points because of the vast nature of the data sets. So this can lead to privacy concerns, and we'd be amiss to think that the advantages that we get from AI running businesses and helping us move forward, that cyber criminals aren't doing the same thing with their tool sets. Last thing is transparency and consent. So traditional systems, it was much more straightforward to consent to data collection, but AI's data is being analyzed in a more complex way, and it makes it harder to explain how personal information is used. And this transparency can cause trust to erode with platforms and customers and clients. So it's important to understand what makes that up. So some of the solutions that can address these challenges. So one of the most common ones, and that's why it's first, is using anonymization and pseudonymization. It's a tough one, which involves altering what might be considered personal data that is in a data set that you might be using, so that it can't easily identify individuals. Ultimately, you probably don't typically use that personal information to process the data, so it's not as important, but it still allows the AI to be effective. So using another approach, differential privacy, this one allows the AI systems to learn from crowd data with exposing individual records. This sort of helps ensure that no one person's data can be tracked back to them and safeguarding that individual's privacy. But still gives you the benefit of large data sets for things to learn from. And the other one is federated learning offers, which is a privacy-focused method of training AI based on locally stored data without putting that data to a shared location. This means that AI improves its capabilities without needing to centralize the data, which allows for the information to be kept more secure. So ensuring data security and compliance is super important. Here's a couple of things that you can do to follow some best practices. So regular data audits to understand who has access to data. It's only authorized for people who are meant to see it is really important. Encrypting data protects sensitive data, both when it's being sent somewhere, transmitted, and when it's being stored. This has very much become a default for any device that you're using. So your iPhone is encrypted, and there's lots of stories about that not being able to be broken. encryption by default is coming out on most Windows devices when you connect your accounts. So it's a pay to play now, alongside multi-factor authentication, or MFA. That adds an extra layer of security by requiring more than one form of authentication to access a system. And like other systems, keeping the AI up to date is really important, because if there's any vulnerabilities or fixes that need to be done to maintain the security, that's when they get released. So it's really important to follow these almost basic standards of technology security hygiene as it applies to AI as well. Now, we're going to touch a little bit on the compliance requirements in Australia. So we have the Australian Privacy Act from 1988, and businesses are, that sort of defines how businesses are required to manage and store data, how responsible they are. That had an amendment, I think it was 2018, where the notifiable data breach scheme became a mandatory reporting structure of when data breaches happen, for when a person might be affected by a data breach. This also applies to the AI tools. So we need to make sure that they're following along those as well. Businesses that operate in a finance or energy sector may also need to comply with consumer data right, which gives consumers better control over their data. These structures will help maintain those secure systems, because there's obviously steps you need to take to be in compliance with these things. But even if you're not following these at the moment, we've seen that the Australian government is bringing in their Cybersecurity 2030 plan. We need to make sure that we understand that those requirements are going to become more mandatory across the board, and the standard and the bar is going to be lifted across the board. So best to start trying to cover some of these things sooner than later. And with that, we get to the end. There are some reference links there, which is really helpful. So some of the resources that we've used to help put this together today. But we are taking questions. If you can use the UA&A button that is in the Teams webinar, and we'll just check those and see if we've got any questions that have come through. So here's one: how can we ensure that our customer data is safe using AI tools? So implementing the data security measures that we just spoke about, like encryption, regular software updates, multi-factor, these will help manage the unauthorized access to that information. It's also important to restrict who can access the data to then put it into these tools, which is a fundamental thing that should be in place already. Regular training as well, just to make sure the staff understand what can happen. And just making sure that people understand not to put that sensitive data into the system. So anonymizing data is really important. One instance that I'll call to that I have seen is, somebody using a tool like ChatGPT, and when you're using ChatGPT, you've got your chats down the left-hand side. Now, if you're finished using those chats, it's a good idea to clean them out and get rid of them. Reason being, if your ChatGPT account was compromised for any reason, even those data that's in the chats of the questions you're asking that might have sensitive information becomes available to that person that has gotten to your account. So always try to clean up after you're finished using a tool to make sure that it doesn't become an attack vector. Do we need to worry about data privacy laws if we're a small business? Yes, everybody needs to. We see all too often that even people personally are being affected by cybersecurity incidents. That is typically happening because profiles are being able to be built on people. The Privacy Act requires it as well. So you have to manage and protect personal information responsibly. We don't have the EU version to that quite degree yet, but that sort of thing is coming. As I mentioned before, Cybersecurity 2030 plan for Australia is going to raise the bar. So definitely ensure that the tools you're using, whether they're AI or not, are in adherence with those regulations, and For simplicity's sake, it is much better if the data or the tool that you're using is located on Australian shores, depending on who your customer base is. Next question is, what do we do if there's a data breach? So ideally, even a small business should have a data breach response plan, and that's just a document that outlines what to happen if something happens. Those instances, there's some documentation on the screen there with some links on how that works with privacy guidance for organizations and agencies. Need to make sure that you're notifying the affected customers and going through that process. There's a reporting structure. If you have cybersecurity insurance through your insurance broker, your first point of call is likely to be them because they can bring in cybersecurity experts, conduct forensic investigations, and help to prevent the spread from getting any worse. If you don't have cybersecurity insurance, it's definitely something to look at because it's not just about what you may lose, but it's also reputational impact. It's your lost wages while you're trying to recover a system. It could be your legal fees. There's a whole bunch of aspects to it, so definitely have a look at that. But you do need to report a breach where some harm may come from a person. So I believe that's the loose language, but and that's all we have for questions at the moment. Thank you for joining us. Please get in contact with us if you have any questions or any follow-ups. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next one. Bye.